Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your taking the time to come listen to Michael and tell us stories about the Arctic. And um, we've, we're like improvising on technology, so bear with us. We have good intentions, but it's a couple of different systems trying to talk to each other. So, Michael Boardman, we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Glad to be here. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day or evening to come hear me advocate for the Arctic. Let's see. So we're looking at the Zoom screen. Is that how we're going to do it on the Zoom? We've got the Zoom screen on the computer screen. Is that the best way, or is there a way? Okay, we'll just go for it. So in 2019, I had a life-changing experience and was selected to be artist in residence for Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I went to a place that I've been dreaming about since I was a kid, and just it changed my life. And I'm going to talk about that, and I'll talk about my journey to get there. It's not advancing. Well, already in. All right. Got it. So just the artist in residencies. It's an awesome opportunity for an artist to get out of his studio work, get away from email, and be immersed in a landscape and just create and just be inspired by where you are. I've been really lucky to do a number of really cool artist residencies. I love this quote, and they've all been sort of in wilderness settings, which has been amazing. I love this quote by Alice Murray. You cannot overlook the importance of wild country as a source of inspiration, which we give expression in writing, poetry, drawing, and painting, mountaineering, or just being there. And my artist in residency journey started in 2010 when I was selected to be the artist in residence at Baxter State Park. I was going to say, you can tell that's not Alaska. It was very early in my art career, doing watercolor painting. I was a graphic artist before that, still am. But I had 2 weeks to just explore around Baxter State Park. I was based at Dacey Pond and climb the mountain and climb other mountains and see great views. And it really inspired me to start nature journaling and sort of drawing my experiences on a little pad of paper as I hiked around. And I really liked that aspect of being able to carry your stuff, go out somewhere, do a sketch. I had a little watercolor kit. I could do a little watercolor painting and put some color on there and just explore. This is not a field sketch. Obviously, this is a finished landscape painting that I did. Started from life at Dacey Pond and then finished at my studio. I was really fortunate after that to be selected as artist in residence for Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska, Southeast Alaska. It's where I asked my wife to marry me many moons ago on a solo kayaking trip. On day 2, unfortunately, she said yes, so the rest of the 5 days of our trip were a little more pleasant than if she had said no. But it was amazing. There were humpback whales everywhere. And on this artist residency, I was able to connect with wildlife biologists doing field work, doing whale scientists and orca scientists, the humpback whale study people, some seabird biologists. And it was through this great program called Voices of the Wilderness, which is an Alaskan residency program that takes about a dozen different Alaska wilderness areas and pairs them with artists that apply to be part of the residency program. And you get to spend a couple weeks doing stuff with the biologists or the rangers or whatever project they have going on. You get to sort of experience wilderness through the people that take care of the wilderness and use your art to advocate for that. So it's a really amazing experience. Somewhere along the way, I got kind of birdie. Field sketching kind of took over my life. I did a lot of drawing. I tried to have a lot of experiences observing different wild creatures in their environment and sketching them when I could. And along that way, I sort of found that birds were a really easy way to experience another form of life that lives on our planet that is really interesting. In fact, amazing. And I do have to warn you that you're going to get a lot of bird facts in this talk. I am coming from this as an artist and a birder. So if you're at a party and you need to throw out some bird facts to keep the ball rolling, I'll have a lot for you to go with. This was at Schoodic in Maine and down East Maine. And my father, who is here, joined me on this little expedition hike up Schoodic Mountain to see this spruce grouse that I had been warned that was hanging out there and was kind of friendly. So I sat down to sketch it, and it jumped on my lap and then climbed up to my head and then flew off my head, and did that 3 times while I was trying to sketch it. Like it was crazy. But this field sketching thing really is a cool way for me to explore my environment and to feel to be a pretend biologist. I think it's really what it comes down to. I want to be a biologist. I never had statistics. I never had college math. I was an art major from University of Maine. So yeah, I get to do these really cool, immersive biological things, experiments and stuff without ever having done any of that. So I get like the best of the best part of being a biologist without having to do all the reports and after the fact. One thing that you can't read here, there's a great Inupiat word that kind of covers how I feel about, or the feeling I get when I'm field sketching and watching animals. And it's blocked out, which is good because I cannot pronounce it to save my life. But it says to feel deeply happy and a sense of expansiveness and exhilaration in the presence of animals. I think that's my whole jibe. That's what really gets me going. So in 2019, I was selected to be the artist in residence at Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, as I said. And they reached out to me and said, I don't know if you'd be interested in this, but your residency, what we're planning on is we're going to take you out to the coastal plain of Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to a remote field tented camp. And you'll be studying birds for 2 weeks, all the breeding birds that migrate just to the Arctic tundra to raise their young. And you'll be with a bunch of ornithologists and biologists. And I was like, oh yeah, I think that would work out just fine. While I was there, Fish and Wildlife Service brought in their kind of PR person, who is this great woman, Lisa. And she did a bunch of videos of the experience we were having there flying in. And she put together this little clip, which is about a 2-minute video, which describes the setup of where we were so much better than I can. So I'm just going to play this. I don't know where the volume is on that thing, but this is the video I play when I'm having a bad day. And this was my experience. I flew in a small plane 300 miles from Fairbanks through the Brooks Range to Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Just me and the pilot. You're landing on the tundra with the big fat tires on the float plane. Cessna. We can all thank Fish and Wildlife Service for that awesome video. Oh, no. There we go. So I land on the tundra, hop out of the plane, drag my stuff over to camp, and immediately look out, and there's this mountain range 20 miles off in the distance. It's clear, it's beautiful. We're on a fork of the Canning River. There are Pacific loons swimming down the fork of the river, and the tundra is starting to explode with wildflowers. And it's just this magical experience in this huge open landscape. The nearest tree is 50 or 60 miles away. It's just this big, flat, awesome open space. It just, yeah, mind blowing. One of the artifacts of the tundra and the coastal plain is that the freezing and thawing constantly makes these polygons, which are these big sort of oddly shaped geometric forms in the tundra that as the snow melts collect water, and they make tundra ponds. And these tundra ponds are a great place for all these water birds to come raise their young, because tundra ponds tend to collect mosquitoes. Lots of birds like to eat mosquitoes and larvae. So what we did is we walked out onto the tundra. We had certain areas where we were looking for as many nesting birds as we could find. We had full waders on. We had to tromp through a lot of ponds. You had to pretty much keep a straight line. So if there was water and it was not too deep, you walked through it to see stuff. And it was great. You got to watch bird behavior and see if if a shorebird was being skulky and moving around. It takes a while to fly into Arctic Refuge. Weather can be very tricky. So I spent a day sitting in the US Fish and Wildlife Service pilot depot at the airport waiting to fly out. And the pilots were all hanging out there, and they knew they had a greenhorn, and they're like, oh, started telling bear stories. And literally every bear story ended with, and they got dragged out by his feet from the tent and we never saw him again. It's like, oh, good. So when I got to the tented camp we were at, and you can see this little tiny solar powered bear fencing around our tent, that's my black and orange tent in the foreground, which was the closest one to the fence. I figured, well, I am the most expendable member of the crew, so that's probably makes sense in case the bear actually shows up. But I had no complaints because my tent had the best view of the fork of the Canning River and birds floating by. I woke up to see a tundra swan swimming down the river fork, and it was just amazing. We had all these great little birds that I really had not a lot of experience with before. Lapland longspurs, a beautiful songbird that we see once in a while here, would sit up on my tent and call at 3 a.m. constantly. And rather than being annoying, it was just cool. I would just wake up, the bird noise was everywhere. So a little where we are for people who aren't familiar with Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. It's the northwest or the northeast corner of Alaska, borders Canada. It's 19 million acres of land, which is pretty much the same size as the state of Maine. I think we've got a few acres on them, and it's all wilderness. There's no roads, there's no paths, there's no official airports. There's only one small town called Kaktovik, which is just outside the refuge. It's a Inupiat community. And it's all protected except for this one chunk of land called the coastal plain here in green. The little red square is kind of where our a little closer to the coast, but that's where our field camp was. And we were looking for shorebird nests, mostly. Shorebirds are the little birds we're seeing on the beach right now, running back and forth. They breed in the Arctic, and they're flying south right now after having had their babies, or the babies are flying south, and they're trying to power up with as much food as they can before they fly the rest of their journey, which is oftentimes southern South America. So those little birds that are madly feeding on the beach are doing some good, serious work, and they need to be doing it. But their nests are very cryptic and hard to find, so you got to watch for behavior. But they let the artists do a little bit of science. I got to see these nests, and I got to float the eggs in the water to see how old the eggs were. there was a whole protocol of things that we did. And some of the nests got a game cam put on them for pictures of what happens to the nest. They wanted to sort of see what the nest success of Arctic breeding species looks like on the tundra in an undisturbed environment. So they set up this game cam, and they were nice enough to share a few pictures of the game cam with me. This is looking right at the nest. Luckily, he didn't find my tent. I was really curious if the caribou are aware of the bird nests and pay attention to that. And I guess the word from the biologist is no, they have no idea. They just do their thing, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And this guy, it's bad enough you steal the egg, but what are you doing in the nest cup? Come on. Something video. Yes. So field sketching in the Arctic, you have to work fast. I'm drawing a pair of tundra swans that are hanging out on the side of the pond. And this is just a quickie view of my process. I'm looking at things. I've got a pair of binoculars. I'm looking at the binoculars, putting them down, trying to remember what I saw, doing a little drawing here and there. I've got a water-soluble pencil, so I can do a little with a water brush. I can do a little bit quick shading. I'm trying to work as fast as I can. No color involved in this one at this point, but just a little overview. There were so many birds, so many fascinating birds. This is a dunlin. This is a bird we see in Maine a little later in the season that looks completely different. All these birds are in breeding plumage, so they're all shiny and dressed up and colorful. And the dunlin has this big black breast and this russet back. And when we see them, they're gray. They're just dead gray. Semi-palmated sandpipers were everywhere. That was probably the most prolific bird we saw, and that's the most prolific bird we're seeing on the beaches in Maine right now for shorebirds. Red-necked phalarope. So this is a cool bird. Two things about this bird. One, it's pelagic, so it spends its entire life out to sea on the ocean, floating around and feeding on little whatevers that are floating in the ocean near big patches of seaweed. And then it only comes to land for this one little time to the Arctic tundra to breed. And they swim around in circles in the Arctic ponds, and they do this in the ocean too. They twirl their feet around, they make these little pirouettes, and that pirouette makes a gyre that brings stuff up from the surface. And then they pick off all the stuff that they get on the surface. And the other interesting thing about phalaropes is that in most birds, it's the male that's the more brilliantly displayed, shiny looking bird. And the phalaropes, it's the female, because what the female does is she displays, she attracts males, she mates with males, she lays the eggs, the male goes and sits on the eggs, and she goes to the next spot and finds another male, mates with that male, lays another set of eggs, the male sits on those eggs, and then she flies south. He does all the work. So yeah. Very interesting bird. That is a long-tailed duck. It's not a long-tailed duck that we ever see. Ours are all black and white, but it's really cool that the plumage is completely different. Another bird I really enjoyed seeing was a pectoral sandpiper. It's a bird, they gave me the bird list for what I would expect to see in Arctic Refuge. And that bird was on the list, and it was interesting because I had literally 3 or 4 months before I had them in the farm next to my house, sort of walking through the farm field and picking around where the cows are and stuff. And they're a sod piper, or grass piper, it's called. It's a bird that looks for wet spots. It's not on the beach necessarily, looks for wet spots in farmlands and stuff. I thought, oh, that's cool. But little did I know, this is the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the bird world. The males during breeding season have this huge throat patch that covers their whole chest. It's like puffs out, and they fly around and they make this crazy call. They fly from South America, 3,000 miles all the way to the Arctic. They find a little spot that works for them. The males fly around and call and make this crazy call, which I'm not going to do a lot of bird calls, just to warn you, but I will do this one because it's really weird. And I heard it all the time on the tundra, and it goes like this. So they fly around in circles, making this like weird UFO call, trying to attract a female. And the sad truth of it is that 75% of the males are unsuccessful in finding a mate. After all that work, flying up there, I don't know why that reminds me of high school. But that whole idea of we found one pectoral sandpiper nest that something had eaten, either a Jaeger or a gull or something had gotten into. So we found the nest shells, and that kind of inspired this painting of the pectoral sandpiper looking over the depredated nest with the tundra sort of melting underneath. That painting's upstairs. Another bird that I found really fascinating was a beautiful American golden plover. Also another bird that we don't see in it usually, and it's really dramatic plumage with the beautiful gold specks. It's pretty ubiquitous on the tundra. It makes these great calls. That piece is upstairs too. That's a piece from the latest adventure. And their nests are incredibly cryptic. So I was watching this bird, trying to figure out if I could find its nest. It was sort of on this ridge, and it was sort of being skulky, like there was a nest somewhere nearby. And then the female was calling and making some like alarm calls. And I thought, hey, I bet there's a nest there. So as they flew off, I went up there and I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked some more, and I couldn't find the nest. But that's what the nest looks like. And you can see maybe why I didn't find it. The little chick literally looks like a piece of moss. If its head's tucked in, it is exactly like a piece of moss. There's no way to tell. So some of my researchers friends shared me some photos of the golden plover nest they found, and I did a painting from that. Red-throated loons. The loons, both the Pacific and red-throated loons, were all over the place, and their calls were like, yeah, were just great to hear. I really like this piece because this is one of the few pieces I feel like I nailed the reflection on. It's really hard. Don't always do it well, but I do. Just a little pat on my back for myself. It's okay. Another bird that I really wanted to see and was hoping that would be there was a snowy owl. The year previous, I was talking to the person who set the residency up, and they said they had 7 snowy owl nests in this little 2-mile square area of the tundra and that's a crazy amount of snowy owl nests for this one spot. And apparently there were lemmings everywhere. But lemmings are a boom and bust creature. As we see, there they are. It's a Greenland lemming and a brown lemming. So one year there'll be lots and lots of them, and they'll eat all the food, and then they all die off. And then there's no lemmings the next year. There were a few lemmings when I was there, but not many, and no snowy owls. But I'll go back to oh no, yes, I can't go back. But anyways, there were snowy owl pellets and feathers on every little mound and hill. So I got to see where they were nesting and draw the pellets and draw some feathers. And it just so turns out the day after I left, a snowy owl showed up on the research area and landed on a little piece of tundra, and they sent me a picture and said, here, you missed him. But not to worry, because this year I was up in Uktiavik, which is Barrow, on the very northern tip of Alaska, and there was a male snowy owl there that posed quite nicely for some field sketching and some photography. Another amazing bird. Like I said, it's gonna be a lot of birds. But this one's really cool. This is the buff-breasted sandpiper. This bird has reflective white feathers, the male does, on the underside of its wing. So 24-hour daylight in the Arctic, like I mentioned, like they mentioned in the video. So it doesn't get dark, but the sun does go down and dips towards the horizon and comes back up again. So 2, 3 in the morning, the light is really amazing, and it stays that way. It's almost like pre-sunset, like glow everywhere. And that low angle of light is perfect for this bird, who lifts his wing. The reflective white on the wing from the low angle of light shines it and makes a beacon across the tundra. and he waves it around, and he waves it around, looking for some girls to come on over. So it was a cool display. And sometimes they fly up and flitter their wings and land back down again. And if he's lucky, he might get a female to show up. At that point, he arches his wings and does a little dance and makes this tittering call. And he might have one or even two females showing up. But females can be fickle creatures. And sometimes your best display is just not good enough. And you're left all by yourself. I know why this reminds me of college. But some males are successful, and we found a buff-breasted sandpiper nest, which was really rare and a cool thing to find, fairly near the camp. And there was a female running around, so we got to get good looks at a female. There was also Arctic fox research going on while we were in the Arctic at the field camp. So they had found a den, and they were trying to sort of see what the Arctic fox was bringing to the den. So they set up a game cam, had all the things set up, and this fox was successful and had a bunch of kits. And you can see this is the epitome of parentdom as far as I can tell. And they took this great video that they nicely shared with me, and I will share with you. See if you can figure out what that animal is. It's not a fox. Not a badger. No badgers that far north, but it's in the same family. It's a wolverine. The young wolverine had found the den and was really interested in getting those kits, getting a free meal. And there's the male fox trying to scare him off. There it is. He bites the wolverine on the butt, and the wolverine chases after him. And it turns out that fox was successful in protecting that den, and the wolverine did not get the kits, and those kits survived enough to leave the den. Beyond that, we don't know. So that jerk that pooped in the nest maybe wasn't such a bad guy after all. But of course, I wouldn't be talking about Arctic Refuge if I didn't talk about its most iconic animal, and that would be the caribou. There's a herd of caribou that use Arctic Refuge for habitat in many different areas of the refuge, called the porcupine caribou herd. And at its highest strength, it can be up to 200,000 animals. And they spend the winter in the mountains, and sometimes they go over to Canada. And when spring rolls around, they start migrating down the hills and coming down to the coastal plain, this big flat area. And there's a couple reasons for that. One reason is it's big open space. There aren't a lot of rocky outcrops, hills, or hiding places for predators. And all the predators need the mountains to have dens. Wolves and bears both need a lot of structure to dig dens in. So they're stuck in the mountains raising their young. So the caribou, if they're on the coastal plain, are far away from those guys that are going to come try to eat them. And the other thing is, as you get closer and closer to the Arctic Ocean, the wind gets stronger, gets colder, and that cold wind, and there's still residual ice and snow in some of these areas, keeps the mosquitoes, the bot flies, and the warble flies away. And they are serious pests for the caribou. So they want this one spot to birth their young and to be able to hang out while the young get strong enough to meander and wander through. Another really cool thing about caribou. So this is, I'll tell this story first. We were crossing one of the rivers, and there were a couple plovers in the foreground. And then I looked in the background, there was a line of caribou, and I couldn't decide what to focus on. It was like, oh, birds, caribou, caribou, birds, caribou. And it was such a cool, that feeling of overwhelming delight at having lots of options. So I wanted to sort of capture that idea of these two migratory creatures, one that goes 700 or 800 miles across land to find its one spot, another that flies 3,000 or 4,000 miles across the air to find this one spot to breed, and everybody comes to this one, pristine habitat that we haven't messed up yet. Another cool caribou fact that I'll share with you is that one of the females, both males and females have antlers in caribou. The males have these big honking antlers, one of which my dad brought back from Alaska when he was young that I have above my desk. And the females have much smaller antlers, and the males drop their antlers early in the rutting season in the fall. After they're done sort of doing their thing, the antlers go because it's a lot of weight to carry around. But the females hang on to them sometimes through the winter. One, that means that every reindeer in Santa's sleigh is a female because they have antlers. And two, when those females finally decide to drop their antlers, it's usually somewhere close to the coastal plain where they're going to drop their calves. And the reason for that is those antlers drop, they're calcium loaded. The rodents eat up the antlers because it's free calcium. They poop out calcium for the plants absorb the calcium, and then when the baby caribou are there, they can grow stronger bones from eating the calcium that are loaded in the plants. And that's the kind of crazy weave of natural history that makes the Arctic so fascinating for me. My project for my artist residency was to design this migratory map of a set of bird species that all breed in Arctic refuge and where they spread to after. And their migratory journeys are amazing. Birds that breed in Arctic refuge hit every state in the US, every country in the world except Antarctica. They're going everywhere, and they all come to this one spot. It's also a landed detail. I'm going slower than I thought, so I'll just speed up a little bit. But there are just wondrous little plants and lichens and things growing around the tundra that just absorb your attention. The pilot who landed said, "Pay attention, it's a landed detail. Get down in the tundra and really look." And I sure did, and I was just blown away by all the plants and all the cool things in the landscape. Politicians call this a white wasteland there's absolutely nothing there, but they haven't been there and they haven't looked. I'm a predator guy, I have to say. I'm a big fan of birds of prey. So when a peregrine falcon showed up and landed on the outhouse, I was really excited to draw the peregrine falcon, and all the researchers were really excited that I drew the outhouse, apparently. But like the wolves and like the bears, peregrines and other birds of prey need the mountains to raise their young. So there weren't a lot of predators around when I was there. So I decided on my next trip that I would go to the mountains. And I invited my son Elliot to come along with me. And we rafted the Marsh Fork of the Canning with a group of, this is a commercial trip with a group of birders and other explorers, most of which were far older than me, but in better shape too. So this one, but we landed on this awesome riverbank, and Elliot and I set up our tent, and we looked and we saw this great point that sort of looks out on the river valley. I say, this is where we should set it. This is a great view. Let's set up our tent here. And we did, and we looked, and it's like, hey, there's wolf poop all over here, mostly older. It's like, huh, I guess the wolves thought this was a good spot too. And it wasn't too long before Wolf showed up, fairly far away. I had to get my scope out to get a good look at him. But he sort of watched us. It's entirely possible this animal had never seen a human being before. It's probably a younger wolf, sort of like, laid down, sat up again, kept an eye on what we're doing, and eventually trotted off. But I got my scope out, and I got a great couple sketches of him. And my kind of sketch process with an animal like this is I draw as much as I can, try to get reference material, and then go back and finish off the sketches, because sometimes it's just 3 lines before something moves and you don't get a lot. Sometimes something will sit there for a long time. I'll point out a couple points where the sketch is completely from life. Golden eagles were there too. That was great to see, flying around, circling the mountains. Arctic warblers and these cool little plants called hawksbeard. American dippers, which is a bird that lives, a songbird that lives almost completely in the water. They dive for aquatic insects. So they sit on a riverbank. They have these slick back feathers, and they jump in and hunt water bugs and stuff. Really cool. There was one bird that I really wanted to see, and being the predator guy I am, it was gear falcon, which is a big Arctic falcon. I wanted to see it so bad I printed it on the cover of my sketchbook, just sitting there with my palette and whatnot. So we did a hike up to a mountain ridge, and I sat on the ridge. Everybody else except my son Elliot went back down. Elliot continued hiking, and I sat and sketched. And as I was sketching the rocks and the river valley that looked down, I heard this screaming, and this gear falcon flew by at like 100 miles an hour. Just zoomed by. Barely got a look at it. So he didn't really make it in the sketchbook, but I did get to see that bird. So that was cool. The geology of the mountains in Arctic Refuge is just incredible. It was an ancient seabed millions and millions of years ago. It's been folded, twisted, bent, eroded. It looks otherworldly. It's straight out of Lord of the Rings, some of the spires and the rocks and the things coming up, and it's just amazing. And being a riverbed, there's lots of fossils around. So we got to find these chunks of coral and these little like shells and things that made in the sketchbook. But the coolest thing we found was our guide had made a little stash of these 2 chert flakes he found, which are kind of covered by, they're on the top of the image, covered a little bit by the zoom thing. But signs that ancient people had been here for hundreds and hundreds of years making stone tools to hunt caribou. And the place where the stone tools were found was an area we could look out and see across both river valleys. So I had the experience that, this isn't just a landscape of wilderness and animals. This is a landscape that people have used for a long time too. That continued when our guide brought out this other artifact he found, which was a whale rib scraper or hide scraper. And he just had it stashed in a bush on this thing and pulled it out. It had all these little marks on it. Who knows how old it was or who created it, but it was amazing to hold it in your hand, to think about the age and the use of that tool. And while I was thinking about this, we went up to a mountain ridge and looked over, and there was a great view of a river valley. And I started to sketch, and I started to think about all the people that had been there, maybe staying there before, waiting for food to show up, waiting for caribou, waiting for Dall sheep. It's just an awesome, awesome place. That's the little sketch I did, unfinished. There's a little pyramid mountain at the end of Marsh Fork of the Canning, where it runs into the main Canning River, which runs along the western boundary of Arctic Refuge, which is where we were for the artist residency. And we weren't able to go all the way to the field camp for the artist residency, but we were in the same water. So that was cool to kind of tie all that together. This year, I was really lucky to be selected to be for a fellowship, the Eckleberry Fellowship, which is 2 artists, wildlife artists, who set up an endowment to get artists out in the field, young artists or artists young in their career, out in the field to do field work. And I applied for this a couple of times and received it this year. So I got to go to the Tulik Field Station, which is very near Arctic Refuge. And it's a big science station on the tundra on the Hall Road, which runs from Prudhoe Bay to Fairbanks. And it was quite a bit cushier than many of my other Arctic experiences. There was no tenting. We had these weatherport things, and there was 3 square meals a day in a big kitchen. There was a sauna. There was a lounge with TV and a music room, real bathrooms. It was pretty cushy, but it was really amazing to be. There's so much climate change research going on at the Tulik Field Station through the University of Alaska Fairbanks. So it's really cool to get that perspective of things that were happening in the tundra. Lots of plant biology going on, the succession of how plants grow, what plants are affected by warmer temperatures and more fertilizing in the soil, and how shrubs interact with the different smaller tundra plants. It was really cool. So it was a lot of focusing on both the small for me, and the lichens were just really awesome. So this one lichen called tumbleweed lichen, which looks like a piece of tumbleweed, rolls across the tundra until it grabs something with those little hooks and then stays there, and that's its spot. So it's all these little tiny details. This is kind of a theme in my work. And then really big stuff. We ran into a herd of musk oxen. We were doing some survey. And they were just awesome prehistoric animals. They look like cow size, but they're like goat size. They're like that tall, big goats. But they're just so prehistoric looking. And there were a bunch of calves with the herd. There were about 15 animals. And I was sort of standing behind the truck drawing them. And all of a sudden they sort of looked at me, and I was taking pictures too. And they all started I don't know if a male snorted or what happened. And all the babies went behind them, and then three or four of the adults lined up with their heads toward me and just stood there. They were a ways away, so it wasn't anything to worry about, but that's their defensive thing. They'd make that circle with all the adults with the bosses on their heads. Their skulls weigh like 50 pounds each. I had a chance to pick up one of the skulls. It's like picking up a rock that size. It's unbelievable. So that was really amazing to see that behavior. There were tons of ptarmigan everywhere we went, running around, flying across the road. And when there's tons of ptarmigan, there happen to be lots of gyrfalcon. So I was really lucky this time to find 2 different gyrfalcon nests and a possible third that I didn't find the nest for that was close to camp. So I got to field sketch gyrfalcon sitting on the nests, the chicks going from little fluffy guys. I was there for 2 weeks, so I got little fluffy balls of fluff to slightly bigger balls of fluff with some feathers poking out of them. And usually there was an adult sitting around the nest, just sort of keeping an eye on stuff. So both drawing musk oxen in the wild and seeing and sketching a gyrfalcon nest were very high on my list of life experiences I wanted to have. There are also, because it's the Arctic tundra and the trees don't get very big, there are trees, but the trees are either willows or birches, and most of them creep across the ground like a creeping shrub. They don't get any higher than, 18 inches tall. There's one Alaskan willow that does get taller, and that's what the musk oxen like to eat, and it likes to grow either along the road or in like river ditches. But it's really interesting. I think these are the trees. They're growing across the floor, growing across the ground. Creeping thing. The research going on was awesome. This is my buddy Ruby. She's holding, I think it's a little birch plant in her hand, and behind, you see those light things behind are all the tents of her experiment that's been going on for 8 years. And she estimated that this little birch in her hand was the same age as her entire experiment. That's how fast things grow. Like I said, we were close to the border of Arctic Refuge. So one day, 2 friends of mine and I hiked up into Arctic Refuge, up the Adigan River Gorge, and found this beautiful place to draw. And we stopped, and I got to see this great mountain range. And here's another video of me working. That weird looking jacket I have is a mosquito coat that has a lot of ventilation, and it has a hood you can pull over if they get really bad. I have to say, I've seen horror story pictures of mosquitoes in Arctic Refuge. I have never experienced it yet. I've had mosquitoes. There were definitely mosquitoes there, but I didn't have to have full coverage. And I feel like I'm just rolling the dice. Next time I go, they're going to get me. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, a lot of the times when I went up higher, there were more mosquitoes. That was kind of their gig. They were around. So another cool mountain sketch. It was really neat to see the flow of the erosion and the different layers of rock and different kinds of rock. But also that trip was amazing because there were wildflowers exploding out of every single piece of tundra like you've never seen before. I couldn't believe it. I think we saw 60 different species of wildflower, all these tiny little things everywhere. And it was just, yeah. And luckily the people I were with were very into wildflowers. So they're pointing out, oh, this is a da da da, and this is here's the, the monk's hood and the yeah, it was just there, it was great. So it was really neat to see all the cool wildflowers and have them talk about them and show them and explain what they were. So field sketching. It's my way to connect with place. George Schaller is a conservation biologist. He was one of the original people who went to Arctic Refuge to study it so it could become a refuge with Olaus and Marty Murray and several other folks. And he's got this great quote that makes me think about how art is related to conservation. He said, you can do the best science in the world, but unless emotion is involved, it's not really very relevant. Conservation is based on emotion, and it comes from the heart. One should never forget that. And that sort of that kind of ties up my feeling. Field sketches for me are both the record of my experience and my emotional connection to the place. And I was really lucky to be able to use my field sketches to do advocacy this spring with our 2 state senators, one of which was very receptive. They were both very receptive. Susan Collins had no idea that birds migrate from all over corners of the world, including Maine, to get to Arctic Refuge. So if that fact stays with her, Angus King said, you don't need to lobby me, I'm on your side. And I was like, yep, check out my sketches, bud. So that was a really neat experience I did through Alaska Wilderness League. But this place is endangered. The tax bill in 2017 passed a mandate to sell oil leases in the coastal plain of Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, where I was, the exact place I was doing studies for. And rather than be selective about it, the Trump administration said, let's just open the whole thing up and see what happens. Well, fortunately, what happened was the oil companies were not interested. A few tiny little like side projects bid on things. The state of Alaska bid on some leases. But basically it was a complete failure. They did the whole thing to pay for some of the tax cuts, thinking it would said raise billions of dollars. It raised less than a couple million. It was some pitiful amount. But that's not keeping them from trying to do it again. So they've got it set up. So they've mandated with the latest tax package 4 lease sales in Arctic Refuge. Fingers crossed, the oil companies are still not interested. There's no infrastructure there. There's no way for them to get the oil out. They'd have to build everything. They'd have to tear up the entire place to do that. So and they have lots of other open leases that they could develop before that. But it is under threat. And I just want to read you a little something. I'll put my glasses on for this. So the wonder of nature constantly inspires me. I feel like most people feel the same way, even if they don't make time to have an experience. Some connection can spontaneously occur that makes them pay attention. We are all painfully aware of how fragile and endangered this place is. The current bill working through Congress will set the stage to demolish this landscape, either directly or indirectly through climate change and impacts from resource extraction. People need to care about what happens up there and to know the intricate web that keeps blooming flowers, laying eggs, and creating bouncy baby muskoxen. Will many of them come to visit here? Not likely, but they will see the birds that have used the tundra to raise their young, and perhaps they'll dream of wild places that we haven't tainted with greed. The Alaskan Arctic is a place where we can test our values to keep one small part of the world as it was before we industrialized our lives. I hope my sketches can help tell the story of this place, to inspire people to care and take action for values that can be found here, for science, for recreation, for inspiration, and for hope. As Samwise Gamgee said, there's some hope good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. It's my son holding so. Here's a note that George Schaller wrote me in a book that my friend had him sign for me. He wrote me I wrote him a personal letter when I got the residency, and he wrote me a personal letter back at the age of 90, thanking me for my work and inspiring me to keep going. So there's one thing we can do now to help. Part of the push to drill in Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and start resource extraction is to find out where the oil is. And to do that, they have to bring these huge thumper trucks in, 90,000-pound thumper trucks that drive across the tundra with bulldozers, and they do a seismic blast. I think they set them up every 600 feet with a seismic blast that tells them what's underneath the subsurface layer of the permafrost. They're trying to push to get this through this winter. They have to do it in the winter because they're not allowed to drive it on the bare tundra. But even so, over the snow, it still has huge effects on some of the caribou that are still there. But really, the real issue is denning polar bears that use the coastal plain in the winter to dig dens, and they don't know where all those dens are. They can't find them, and they do these thumper trucks, send a huge seismic wave, wakes the mother up, scares, and that's it for the babies. Quite possibly the mother too. There's no food in the middle of winter for her to get out in that area. So Alaska Wilderness League has started a petition to tell the government that we don't want this seismic exploration on the Arctic Refuge's coastal plain. For those of you on Zoom, if you can see that QR code and you want to scan that, that'll bring you to the place to sign the petition. And if you all want here in person, I'll put a mailing list out. If you want to be sent the petition, just put a little star on your mailing list address, and I'll email it to you. There's a couple minutes left. I put a video together from my trips to the coastal plain, and it's a quickie, so I'll just play it now. We kick the volume up a little bit. You know how to do that? It's not on the TV, so. Field sketching is my way to connect with the place. I can observe, record. It's the intersection of art and science, and it builds a personal connection for me with the wildlife landscape. Observing and sharing these stories of the natural history of the Arctic gives my work purpose. During the pandemic, I was unable to return to the Arctic. I realized the Arctic was coming. Maine is on the migratory paths of many bird species for the next summertime. Shorebirds in spring and fall, and snowy owls in winter became my way to continue the stories of my Arctic companions and keep a piece of refuge in my heart. To quote the great wildlife biologist George Schaller, conservation is based on emotion. One should never forget that. And art serves to stir these emotions and make connections to the stories of nature. The birds have such fascinating stories to tell. They weave us together in a great tapestry of the natural world. Blatant product placement. I have a business called Coyote Graphics. I do wildlife t-shirts with my designs. Selling my t-shirts helps fund some of my Arctic adventures. I have some cards if you so desire. And if you're online, you can find us at coyotes.com. Also connect to my Instagram account if you're interested in seeing more about what I do. And thank you all so much for paying attention. I really appreciate it. Happy to field the questions either from online or from the audience if anybody has anything they want to ask. Yes.
How all the different wild flowers, the birds fly to see from south and then.
I think possibly that's how but the Arctic Refuge, that area has been open through the Ice Age that was still open land. So a lot of those wildflowers have evolved over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So some of them are very unique to that one area, which is really cool. Or unique to the Arctic environment in general. Some of them are circumpolar. So yeah, I don't know how they get around, but that's entirely possible that that's a way they spread. Anybody else? Yeah.
Thank you. This was so fantastic.
Wow.
I'm actually an Arctic like policy specialist, and so I love.
Oh,
It's
nice.
so like heart centered, and it's nice because I feel like some of the conversations are very like heavy.
Yeah.
So like we need that balance of like heart and head, right? So,
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
But I'm curious, have you had much interaction with the glitch?
Very little. So I haven't, we passed through Arctic Village when we did the river trip. But the airport is far away from town. And I didn't feel like I could just strut into town and introduce myself and say hi. When we did the advocacy in Washington, DC this spring, the members of the Gwich'in Steering Committee were there, and I did chat with them a little bit. I'm trying to pull some strings to get to be able to visit Arctic Village and spend some time sketching there and talking to them and seeing what their view of the refuge is and their view of the natural history of the Arctic and how they use those resources. I mean, it's a really important part of the story. My real goal with all of this is to publish a book that has the story of my Arctic adventures and field sketches and this cool little natural history stories that I've experienced or sort of picked up from other people along the way. So I'm working towards that, and getting to Arctic Village is a big part of that.
I work with the Gwich'in, so if you
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, contact me.
let's do that. That sounds like excellent. Anybody else? Any questions from online? I can't see anything. There's one thing in there. Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah.
I wanted to know what happened when that, once that everybody had their circled up and had their
Yep.
horns up.
We drove away. We let him go. It's like, yeah, all right, I think we're done here. Didn't want to stress him out too much. Oh, and to go back, I didn't mention this at the bear thing, but I had 8 hours of Fish and Wildlife Service bear training. Every group that went out to look for nests had to have somebody with a shotgun trained to, and I've yet to see a bear in Arctic Refuge. The closest thing we got was a clump of hair that was on the outhouse from like early spring that they brought in. So I'm still waiting to see my barren ground grizzly. I have seen polar bears, which is pretty cool in Uktiavik. So still waiting. Didn't get eaten, thankfully. Yeah.
Were those musk oxes, close enough so you could smell
Yep.
them? You're welcome.
I didn't think it was bad. I was like sort of hay scented. It wasn't like terrible. Yeah, well, it might have been different season too. They may not have been in the.
Yeah, you never zipped up your mosquito suit too. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, true. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I'm gonna pop back up. I think we've got a little bit of time to check out the gallery if people want to walk through and ask me questions about pieces or whatever and tell stories. I'm happy to do that. Thank everybody online for joining me, and I hope to see you all again soon.